I had the opportunity to interview Miguel Angel Ponce Sandoval, or my dad. He grew up in Mexico and came over to the US as an illegal immigrant. This is his story. My first question to him was, where did he grow up? And with that, he responded, Zacatecas, Mexico. I then asked him when he first came to the US and how he got here. He originally came over when he was 18. He paid off coyotes to bring him over to the border and drop him off at the river, and then he was taken from the river into the US. I asked him why he gave up his life in Mexico to come to the US. His reasoning was because family and friends. His family was already over here at the time, and they continuously told him how much better and how many more opportunities they had over here, which is what ultimately led him to leave Mexico and come to the US. When I asked him what the biggest culture shock for him was, he said the language. When he first came over to the US, he knew zero English whatsoever, and so he had to adapt and learn, but for him, it was a really hard time trying to figure out and learn how to speak English. I also asked him what are the biggest differences that he saw when he first came over, and he named multiple, some being the bedrooms, the wages, and food. Wages being one of the biggest, as in Mexico at the time, he didn't have many opportunities, so when he came over, he had countless of opportunities to make a decent income here. I asked him if he ever felt discriminated against while in the US, and he said yes and no. See, when he came over, he's, well, the whitest Mexican you will ever meet, and so people mistook him for an American, and then once you started speaking to him, you could kind of tell he was from Mexico. But he also got discriminated against because he, well, ran with some pretty terrible people that gave him a bad rap here. So when my dad came over to the USA, he actually had an opportunity to get his citizenship here. All he had to do was go back and fill out a lot of paperwork in Mexico, but he didn't do that. He didn't want to have to go back to Mexico and live there for even the slightest bit of time. So instead, he stayed in America, which ultimately he got deported from and made it even harder for him to get citizenship, which he never got. But I asked him, did he regret his decision to not go back? And he said yes. He extremely regrets it. He wished that he would have done it, but he can't now. I asked him what the most difficult part about coming to the US was, and he gave me two responses. The first one was being held hostage by the coyotes, which ultimately my mom had to go down there and pay for him to come into the USA and be let free. But his second one was leaving his mom. His mom taught him everything and basically was there for him all the time. He was a mama's boy, pretty much. And so when he left Mexico, he left her there too. And it was pretty hard for him to adapt without his mother. My dad has illegally snuck into the US about 4 to 5 times, every time being deported right back. But I've asked him this final question, if he could, would he come over here and stay? And he said he didn't know, because with how Mexico is now, he loves the way it is. Although besides all the gangs, he still loves it there, and he's with a lot of his family now, and he's created a new family there. And that's my dad's story. It may not be a perfect story, and it may not have a happy ending, but it's his story.